Dallas has trailed for an absurd 164 minutes of game time at home this season. That's the most time trailing by any team through their first 3 home games of a season dating back to the merger in 1970. They trailed by at least 22 in all 3 home games. And this is a place where coming into the playoff game against Green Bay, they'd gone on this absurd winning streak at home. Couldn't beat them there. Now they're getting trucked. Meanwhile, Detroit wins the game, yes, but Dan Campbell on the reaction to the Hutchinson injury.
We hate it for Hutch. That's tough. It was tough. And he's in good hands right now. He's being taken care of. He'll stay back here. Obviously he's going to be down for a little while. And so that's tough, man. It's hard when you lose somebody like him. But we'll know a lot more after this, and obviously wish him the best.
Tim is back as promised. I'm not asking how do you replace the guy. That's a rhetorical question. You don't. He's singular. But what did Detroit demonstrate after what could have really been a crushing moment with how they responded in the field?
I mean, Scott, even when you're reading the highlight, like if you're a fan of NFL football, like you have to feel for what just happened on that field there. Like it's just an element of, I don't even know what the word is, sorrow, panic, like whatever it is.
Your humanity,
yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's awful, right? And so it's a blowout game at that point. The Detroit Lions could have said, hey, man, let's just cover this ball up. Let's get out of here. Let's take the win and let's go. But instead, the fight that was in the football team, the aggressiveness that was still in that football team, I think gives you a glimpse into kind of how mentally tough they are. Look, they forced a punch out. They forced the turnover.
Sure.
Then they get the ball back. It's play action early. It's shots down the field. It's catch and run opportunities. Heck, they're even trying to throw, touchdown passes to offensive linemen running trick plays.
There's a lot in that.
Listen, there's a lot in that.
Right.
But coming up with other turnovers, there just was so much that happened after that injury where you look at it and you go, there are a lot of teams, and look, it'll hurt those players because they care about their teammates. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there was an element of hey, we're going to dial it in even more, focus in a little more. I think that's a good sign for this football team in terms of how they carry on without him.
You talk about the skill group that they have that surrounds Goff, right? It's multiple. We've talked about that a lot already this year. They can hammer it, they can go speed. They got a more trick plays seemingly than anybody with Ben Johnson. If you combine the play caller, the skill set, and the depth of the skill set, who's their equal right now?
Yeah, I don't know that there is an equal right now because the guys that you're talking about in terms of speed, in terms of a play caller that's just feeling it in a groove and has got creative stuff each and every week. I don't know that there's one right now in the NFL. Last year I sat at this desk with you and it felt like we talked about the Dolphins every single week.
And before that was the Eagles.
Yes, because it was creative stuff. It was super talented players. It was play callers that were dialed in and kind of one step ahead.
Right.
That's what it feels like right now in Detroit. I mean, receivers across the board with a ton of speed. You mentioned it in terms of backs. And then a quarterback that's making really good decisions and has been aggressive with the football. Look, Tua led the league in passing yards last year.
Right.
Similar things going on in Detroit.
From Dallas's perspective, they head into a bye. And for as involved as Jerry Jones is, he's really traditionally not a reactionary guy, right? I'm putting it together in my head and I'm thinking, man, the stink of this with Dallas, nothing happens anonymously or quietly with them. I'm thinking, I wonder if would he get rid of McCarthy? But then you talk to people that's really not what the guy does. Mm-hmm. But whether he does that or doesn't, and let's just say he doesn't, you still got to deal with this. What do you do to try to address what the issues are that are plaguing Dallas at the moment?
I think the hard part is I don't even know if anybody truly knows where you start. Think of the off-season chatter of guys saying stuff that's why would you say that? It means you question the veteran leadership. You hear Dak at the podium after the game, almost saying refuting maybe what the owner is saying about the team in terms of, was it embarrassing? Was it shocking? Was it concerning? All of those different things. The answers on that, I think are questionable. I think you also have to pay attention to this. Dan Quinn did a really good job with that defense last year, so much so that he became a head coach. The defense has not been very good this year. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. And so while maybe there's not a move at head coach, I think many people thought it was surprising to see Mike Zimmer hired as the defensive coordinator. Really didn't get off to the best start, with just relationally with certain people. And so when that happens, you wonder, is there going to be changes just on the staff in general?
Not just getting beat. As I said, at home, they've been down by at least 22 points in all 3 games. This league you don't see this a lot, right? It's a lot of coin flip games. They got annihilated for the 2nd time in a row at home.
Yeah, I think the reality is you have to do something. So whether that's, a star player that's no longer in the lineup, whether it's a coordinator that's not there or a head coach, like at some point you got to do something because they're going to talk about this for 2 weeks now. That's the other thing for Dallas.
In Dallas, and it's not just Dallas because some teams it would be just local. Yep. This is going to be national. God bless you. Stephen A. is going to put the hat on in the morning. You know it's coming. And you said, I don't know where to start. Have you ever heard the analogy about eating an elephant? What do you do? Well, you just start somewhere and take a bite. It feels like Dallas just has to eat the elephant. Have fun with that. It feels like it might take a while. And Baltimore gets the victory as they dominate on the ground. They've outrushed their opponents by 878 yards this season. That's the highest figure through 6 games since at least 1933, a distinction previously held by the 1934 Bears. A lot of that damage, no shock here. Derrick Henry, 2nd player all-time with at least 600 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns through the first 6 games of the franchise. The other, Eric Dickerson, guy that ran upright as well. That was his rookie year with the Rams in 1983. Hasn't been because of just one game. They've outrushed all 6 opponents by at least 100 yards, which is the 2nd longest streak at any point of a season, dating back to 1950. The only longer streak, 9 straight by the Ravens in 2018. Here's Lamar on getting the win over Washington.
I really feel like we just proved ourselves right. Instead of just talking about it, we was about it today. Just putting points on the board. We started off slow. Even when we was scoring on those drives, I still felt like we was kind of off some way. But like I said, there's room for improvement. We just got to keep stacking.
We're going to play these type of games. Super Bowl contender team. Obviously, they were in the AFC Championship game last year. They got great players all around the field, but it's very promising that we're able to be in this type of game. But moving forward, man, it's not going to get any easier. So we're going to have to go back and watch the film and execute higher, and hopefully on the games coming forward on the other end of that.
Tim Hasselbeck is here. Let's start with Washington since you just heard from Daniels. I don't think it's loser talk to suggest that with this rookie quarterback going into the ring with a heavyweight and trading punches, maybe there's something positive to take out of this loss. If so, what is it?
Well, I think that he's going toe-to-toe with one of the best, if not the best, in some people's mind, quarterback in the game. Look, he drew comparisons to Lamar Jackson coming out of the draft. And sometimes during draft times you hear that, you say, like, that's crazy, relax. But the reality is the explosiveness we've seen from him as a runner, and then what he's been as a passer, could actually make the argument that he's further along as a rookie than Lamar was. And what he did today in terms of responding with Baltimore running the ball the way they were running the ball, facing some brutal 3rd down situations in tight areas and kind of just being unfazed through it all. That's
him, man.
It really was look, they lost the football game. That's a very impressive performance by Jayden Daniels.
You know what's funny is Henry goes to Baltimore, and you think, oh, this is gonna work. But maybe we in our business we can try to squint too hard to try to find some reason that it won't. Oh no, it actually is incredible, and you've got a tape that really illustrates him in this offense and what makes it lethal.
Well, the numbers you were just going over, I mean, nearly rushing their opponents by 900 yards. It's insane.
In 6 games.
It's crazy. But here's the thing about him. You don't have to get too creative with your run blocking. Right. It's basically like zone run schemes because you just need to get him going. So here's an example. It's a zone run scheme. The offensive line is all pushing left. They're leading with a fullback. They obviously have a big fullback and just a little pin action by the receiver up at the top. You get him going and you have great angles and guys don't want to touch him. How it manifests itself is this right here, Scott. Split zone. You get into the red zone here. You're on the 7-yard line. Look at the decisions that are being made. Bobby Wagner picks a side. Henry is to the line of scrimmage, and the safety is backing up, has no intention of tackling Derrick Henry. This is the same exact run we saw on the first play of this illustration. Same blocking scheme, same direction, same everything on it. He's not getting touched until he's, 10 yards down the field. look, it is a perfect match. The biggest thing about Derrick Henry as a runner, you just need to get him going. It's when penetration, behind the line of scrimmage slows him down, some gap schemes, things like that. But if you can zone block and get him going, man, he's tough to stop.
You got a 290-pound fullback and a 270. It's like 560 pounds of human.
It's like
and
two
those
defensive ends in the backfield.
Those aren't the linemen. All right. Stat of the night: the NFC North, 17-5 on the year. The Vikings, who are on their bye because they played in London last week, have not lost. Lions, who obliterate Dallas, 4-1. Packers and Bears, who you just saw, up to 4-2. That's the best record by any division through Week 6 under the current format, which began in 2002. But it's interesting, only been one matchup of these teams head-to-head. Tim Hasselbeck back with me. So, by record, clearly the best division in the league. 4-2, good enough for a tie for last place. But as I just mentioned, there's really been no round robin at all, just one head-to-head game. As the temperatures drop, we move towards Halloween, then Thanksgiving and Christmas. You're going to start having the true round robin, and we'll start to get a little bit of separation. And just as a point of context, Detroit, 2 of their next 3 are against North teams, beginning next week with Minnesota. What do you think we'll see as we move through this schedule in this division?
Well, I think you're right about it being the toughest division because there's no layup in the division. And you look at all the teams, they all have good defenses, they all have the ability to run the football. I think ultimately what we'll see is the separator. And I think 2 teams will separate, Green Bay and Detroit, because of the quarterback play. And that's not to be critical of Sam Darnold or Caleb Williams, but I think that'll be the separator. I think that 2 teams will kind of take a direction in those critical games on the road, in bad weather, managing it. I trust those quarterbacks more than I do the younger quarterbacks. And so I think that, when I look at that, I think, listen, Jordan Love, I think, can play at an MVP level. I think Jared Goff, with what he's done throughout his career in terms of taking teams to Super Bowls, that's the difference. So, look, Love, who got off to a little bit of a slow start because of the injury, looked like the Jordan Love that we expected to see today in some conditions that weren't great at the beginning of that football game.
We talk a lot as we're sitting watching football, and you and I'll go through this a bunch about context, right? Because, record's fine, but who'd you beat? Look at Seattle as an example, right? They start 3-0, and then they've lost the last few. Why? Well, they played much better teams, much better quarterbacks. I do look at Minnesota, and I give them a bunch of credit because they did play San Francisco, right? And they beat them. They had Houston come in, and Houston's only got 1 loss. They looked horrendous against Minnesota, and they've largely played from the lead. So I guess I'd challenge just in this sense. I feel like Minnesota to this point has demonstrated, at least to me, that they're not going anywhere.
Well, they haven't lost, and their wins, to your point, are more impressive. That's true. And listen, even when you look at Green Bay's wins without Jordan Love, that's impressive as well in terms of what it speaks to, what you are as a football team. But you're right about Minnesota, and every time we talk about it, and I can say, look, I think the quarterbacks are going to go in 2 different directions over the full season.
Right.
Pretty much every week Minnesota's played, we've talked about Brian Flores and the job that he's done. We've talked about, and you do that as a defense. Listen, you're going to give quarterbacks an opportunity if they don't make mistakes, to get it right throughout a football game. So Minnesota, in that regard, certainly could head that direction.
Look, the Detroit-Minnesota game next week becomes really intriguing because you have a Minnesota team who's not lost, coming off a bye. And the problem I have for Detroit, because, again, we're talking context, I don't know how to frame what they did today because maybe Dallas stinks. And I'm hesitant to say it, but once is an accident, twice is a trend, 3 times a problem. That's 3 straight home games where they've gotten smoked. But look, I know it got close against Baltimore, but that was a little bit of window dressing, in my opinion. So I look at next week at Minnesota for Detroit. Not as a prove-it spot, but I just want to see if all this momentum from what we were talking about earlier with the play calling and the weapons that Goff's got, what do you do against them? You go in there and hang a big number, and then I'm going to be like, all right, Hasselbeck was right on it.
Well, listen, and because of the matchup inside the matchup, exactly what you're saying, because it's Brian Flores, who we've been talking about, Ben Johnson, who we're talking about, and then Jared Goff. I think in fairness to what Jared Goff has been, resurrects his career. When he goes to Detroit, They're not even really sure he's going to be the starter. Surround him with the talent that they've had, and he's been incredible. And so I do think that, like, in terms of these prove-it moments that teams have throughout the season to say, like, hey, are you for real? Or, hey, did you beat a backup quarterback or a wounded team at the time?
Right.
Listen, maybe Dallas stinks. But, like, we know that they're banged up as well. You know, so
Right.
you definitely got a wounded Dallas team. And they may not be very good. But what we do know is Detroit's pretty good. I think what we'll find out is how good. How good are you against that Minnesota defense?
I do want to just ask a Caleb question because we've talked a whole lot about Jayden, and we did to start the show. They lost. Here's Caleb, four victories, and again, the context, who you played, whatever. At some point, your job's to beat the team you play today, and he continues to do that. And is there an area where he shows you something that you're like, this is super impressive to me right now?
Yeah, I think some of the playmaking that you had in the highlight looks like some of the stuff from SC. I mean, and then in
I agree.
week 1, it was like, no, it wasn't working. And it felt like he was playing uphill the entire time. You know, some of that feel in the pocket and creating, it's like, no, it looks like he's going to be able to do that at this level as well.
And I also think that O-line's helping keeping him, like, he's not like, I got to get the hell out of Dodge at the first moment, right? I think you're seeing a bit more patience there. And look, maybe Jacksonville stinks too. Their record is, but all Chicago could do today was play the Jags and beat them, and they did. And now they're 4-2, and this division's awesome.